independent cinema in Hollywood started saying, hey, maybe these indie films these kids could work in the industry.
Martin Scorsese doesn't just love cinema. He guards it like a temple.
The films, there was also the advent of television, 1948, 49, and the heyday of...
For over 50 years, he's been both student and protector of this art form.
That played his head, somehow the camera wasn't the right.
Yeah, maybe it was that we got...
And sometimes protection means calling out what threatens it. Here's what people don't understand about Scorsese's hatred. It's not petty. It's not about ego or jealousy. When Scorsese hates a film, he's mourning something lost. He's watching cinema betray itself. He's seeing the medium he dedicated his life to get corrupted, simplified, turned into something unrecognizable. These 7 films aren't just bad movies to him. They're warnings. They're examples of everything that can go wrong when filmmakers forget their responsibility, when they choose spectacle over soul, when they pick profits over poetry, when they abandon the audience's intelligence for their wallet. This list matters because Scorsese's hatred is educational. Every film he despises teaches us something about what he believes cinema should be.
The first John Ford Wayne film that I can remember seeing on a big screen, and this was after seeing maybe a few bits.
His rejections are a map. They show us the edges of the cliff, the places where art dies and product begins. So let's examine the 7 films that Martin Scorsese truly hates. And more importantly, let's understand why. 7. Movie 43, 2013. Movie 43 isn't just a bad comedy, it's a crime scene. It's what happens when Hollywood talent decides to humiliate itself for a paycheck.
To use this very powerful tool, because we know film, the image can be so strong, not only for good use, but also for bad use.
Scorsese allegedly watched 20 minutes before turning it off. He couldn't finish it.
Well, I do not start putting down the scarf. Here, feel this. 100% pashmina. Well, at least that's what the guy in the street told me.
Then.
Not because it was crude, but because it was cruel to everyone involved. Here's the story that matters. A producer friend asked Scorsese what he thought after the film bombed critically. Scorsese said something haunting. "It's the saddest thing I've ever witnessed." Artists destroying themselves on camera. He wasn't talking about the crude jokes or the shock value. He was talking about dignity, about actors with real talent debasing themselves for nothing. This film represents everything Scorsese fears about modern Hollywood. The willingness to abandon standards for a quick buck. The complete surrender of artistic integrity. Movie 43 had A-list stars doing sketches that weren't funny, weren't insightful, weren't anything except desperate. It was a comedy without humanity, provocation without purpose. What did Scorsese take from this? A reminder that cinema must elevate even when it explores darkness. Look at The Wolf of Wall Street. That film shows degradation, but it never loses sight of the human cost. It makes you uncomfortable with purpose. Movie 43 just makes you uncomfortable. This is what happens when cinema forgets it owes something to the people who make it and watch it. It becomes a spectacle of self-destruction, and that's not art, that's just sad. 6. Transformers series. The Transformers films aren't movies to Scorsese, they're products.
Why not make the film part of that experience? My concern is 2 concerns, and that is that one is that the filmmakers need the theaters.
They're business models wrapped in explosions and CGI. Michael Bay didn't make movies here. He made commercials that lasted 2.5 hours. And Scorsese sees this as the future Hollywood wants, a future where art dies and algorithms win. Remember when Scorsese made those comments about Marvel films? How they're not cinemas but theme parks? He was talking about Transformers too. These films represent the complete industrialization of storytelling. Every frame calculated for maximum profit. Every explosion is focus grouped. Every character is designed to sell toys. There's no room for human truth here, only spectacle. Here's what haunts Scorsese about these films. They work, they make billions. They prove that audiences will accept anything loud enough and fast enough. And that success teaches studios a terrible lesson. Why fund a silence when you can fund a transformer? Why take risks when robots sell themselves? The metaphor here is simple. These films are the corporate algorithm made visible. They're what happens when cinema becomes pure capitalism, when storytelling bows to shareholders, when directors become brand managers instead of artists. What Scorsese learned from watching this franchise succeed is darker than the films themselves. He learned that the battle for cinema's soul might already be lost, that audiences might prefer noise to nuance, that the market might destroy what took a century to build. These aren't movies. They're the end of movies. 5. Crash, 2004. Crash won Best Picture in 2006. Scorsese's The Departed won the next year, but he never forgot what Crash represented.
We're trying to create something different in a way from, but that fantasy, yeah, that fantasy is there.
A film that mistakes obviousness for depth. That confuses preaching for storytelling. That tells the audience exactly what to think about racism instead of letting them feel it. Paul Haggis made a movie with a message stamped on every scene. Characters don't behave like humans. They behave like symbols in a morality play. Every interaction is designed to teach a lesson. Every coincidence engineered to prove a point. Scorsese allegedly told a colleague that Crash was a film school lecture pretending to be art. Here's what bothers Scorsese most. Crash won over Brokeback Mountain, a genuine piece of cinema lost to a sermon. And that victory told Hollywood something dangerous. That obviously beats subtle. That message beats the story. That you don't need to trust your audience's intelligence. The lesson Scorsese takes from Crash connects directly to silence. That film asks questions about faith without answering them. It trusts the audience to wrestle with doubt. It refuses to preach. Crash does the opposite. It gives you all the answers in the first 20 minutes. Cinema that tells you what to think has already failed. Real films ask questions. They create space for the audience to discover meaning. Crash eliminates that space completely. This is a cinema classroom, and Scorsese didn't spend 50 years making films to watch art become homework. 4. Gotti, 1996. This one is personal for Scorsese. He spent decades exploring the mob with Goodfellas, Casino, and The Irishman.
In my mind, I've never really seen the film, because if I'd seen it then, it would have been something just embedded in my brains.
He knows this world. He knows how to show it honestly. Then HBO made Gotti, and everything Scorsese worked for got undone in 2 hours. The story goes that Scorsese discussed this film with Nicholas Pileggi after it aired. Pileggi wrote the books behind Goodfellas and Casino. They both saw the same problem immediately. Gotti turned a criminal into a hero. It romanticized all the wrong elements. The violence became cool. The betrayals became noble. The destruction became glamorous. Everything Scorsese spent his career avoiding. Here's the difference. Goodfellas shows you the mob life and then shows you the cost. The paranoia, the violence, the inevitable collapse. You're seduced and then you're punished for being seduced. Gotti just gives you the seduction. It makes John Gotti look like a working-class hero fighting the system. This is how you tell a mob story wrong. You forget that these men destroyed lives. You forget the victims. You turn organized crime into a fairy tale. Scorsese's mob films are tragedies. Gotti is a tribute. That's not cinema. That's public relations. What Scorsese learned here reinforced everything he believed. That showing violence requires responsibility. That exploring criminals means showing consequences. That cinema must never mistake charisma for virtue. They made Gotti a hero. Scorsese made Henry Hill a cautionary tale. That's the difference between exploitation and art. 3. Armageddon, 1998. Scorsese allegedly said something brutal about Armageddon after watching it. I couldn't find the movie through the explosions.
First 12 minutes of the film, incredibly tight economic screenwriting. Armageddon belongs in the long tradition of disaster pictures.
That sentence captures everything he hates about Michael Bay's approach to cinema.
Freedom, you fire that engine. If there's not a way, you find a way. The clock's ticking. Let's go. Let's fire that engine, Freedom. You got less than
It's not filmmaking, it's visual assault. It's the death of patience packaged as entertainment. Here's what Armageddon represents to Scorsese: the complete abandonment of visual grammar. Shots that last 2 seconds. Cuts that come before your brain can process what you're seeing. A camera that never stops moving because stillness might let you think. Bay doesn't direct scenes, he detonates them. Every frame screaming for your attention. Every moment terrified of silence. Scorsese built his career on the opposite philosophy. He understands that cinema needs breathing room, that a long take lets you live inside a moment, that stillness can be more powerful than explosions. Watch the tracking shot in Goodfellas. Watch the silence in Taxi Driver. That's a director who trusts his audience to feel without being bludgeoned. The metaphor here is simple. Armageddon is what happens when editing becomes epilepsy, when filmmakers mistake chaos for energy, when they're so afraid of boring you that they assault you instead. Bay films don't have rhythm, they have seizures. 2. Caligula, 1979. Caligula is the film that taught Scorsese where the line is. The line between exploring darkness and drowning in it.
Like a documentary, but the camera moves, everything you see, it's all there in the script. We had to stage bits of action.
Between provocation with purpose and shock for shock's sake. He allegedly walked out of a screening in the early 80s, not because he was offended, because he was bored. Because beneath all that explicit content was absolutely nothing. Here's what people don't understand about this film. It had legitimate talent involved. Malcolm McDowell, Helen Mirren. Gore Vidal wrote the original script. Then Penthouse founder Bob Guccione took over and turned it into pornography disguised as a historical epic. The sex and violence became the point instead of the story. Everything else disappeared into the excess. Scorsese knows how to film darkness. Taxi Driver explores a disturbed mind without glorifying it. Goodfellas shows brutal violence but never lets you forget the human cost. Casino depicts moral decay with surgical precision. These films use darkness to illuminate truth. Caligula just wallows. It mistakes graphic content for depth. It confuses the audience's discomfort with artistic achievement. The lesson here connects to everything Scorsese believes about cinema. Provocation must serve a purpose. Shock must reveal something true. Violence on screen carries responsibility. You can't just throw depravity at the audience and call it art. You have to mean something. 1. The Birth of a Nation, 1915. This is the film Scorsese hates most. Not because it's technically bad, because it's technically brilliant in service of something evil. D.W. Griffith invented the language of cinema with this film. Then he used that language to glorify the Ku Klux Klan. That's the tragedy. That's what haunts Scorsese. The proof that mastery without morality is just propaganda. There's a story from Scorsese's teaching days at NYU. He screened Birth of a Nation for his students. After it ended, nobody spoke. Not because they were moved, because they were horrified at what cinema could do in the wrong hands. Scorsese let the silence sit. Then he said something his students never forgot. This is why we have a responsibility. Cinema is the most powerful art form ever created. This film proves it. Here's why this tops the list. Birth of a Nation isn't just racist, it's effective racism. It uses every tool Griffith pioneered. Cross-cutting, close-ups, epic scale, emotional manipulation through editing. All of it was weaponized to make audiences cheer for white supremacy. That's cinema's original sin, its power used to spread hatred. This film led directly to Killers of the Flower Moon decades later. Scorsese needed to tell a story about racism that did the opposite. That showed the victims, that refused to make villains heroic, that used cinema's power to illuminate instead of corrupt. These 7 films share one truth. They abandon cinema's responsibility to illuminate the human condition. They choose spectacle over soul, profit over poetry, easy answers over difficult questions. Scorsese's hatred protects what he loves. It reminds us that cinema matters too much to waste on emptiness. Which film would you add to this list? Let us know in the comments below and subscribe for more deep dives into cinema's greatest minds.